Chapter 1. Seductive Beginnings. Vanessa Reid wasn't born into a world of privilege, but you'd never know it by looking at her. She moved with the grace of someone raised among high society, her every gesture laced with an air of effortless allure. In her world, beauty was a weapon and charm was a skill sharpened to a deadly edge. She wasn't simply beautiful, she was mesmerizing, a dark-haired enchantress with piercing green eyes that left men spellbound. But Vanessa wasn't interested in love or fairy tales. She was after something more tangible: power, control, and most of all wealth. Her first night's work was at a sleek penthouse bar overlooking the city skyline. The place catered to an exclusive crowd: CEOs, tech moguls, and the occasional trust fund heir out to flaunt his money. It was exactly where Vanessa needed to be. She sipped a dark red cocktail, a swirl of expensive liquor and intent in her hand, her gaze drifting over the sea of wealthy men. She looked like she belonged there, every inch of her carefully curated to fit this glittering world. Then her eyes landed on her first target, Jason Moore. A successful but unassuming businessman, Jason had recently come into a sizable inheritance, which he hadn't exactly kept secret. A creature of habit, he frequented the penthouse bar every Thursday night, nursing a scotch while nervously fidgeting with his Rolex. Vanessa watched him from across the room, a slight smile pulling at her lips. With deliberate ease she glided across the room, a vision of confidence and charm. She slipped onto the bar stool next to him, crossing her legs just enough to catch his eye. Jason looked up, his gaze flitting from her legs to her face, momentarily stunned by her presence. "Rough day?" she asked softly, her voice velvet smooth. It was a simple question, but it was all she needed to open the door. He stammered a bit, caught off guard. Yeah, you could say that," he managed, offering a shy smile. Vanessa's smile widened, disarming yet inviting. "Well, maybe I can make it better," she murmured, her hand grazing his arm just enough to send a spark through him. The next few hours passed like a well-rehearsed play. Vanessa listened, laughed, and leaned in close, weaving a web of interest and allure that Jason couldn't escape. She learned he was recently divorced, his heart bruised and wallet considerably lighter. An unfortunate but common tale among the men Vanessa pursued. By the time he was half a bottle in, Jason was putty in her hands, his eyes filled with a mix of awe and need that she knew well. As the evening waned, Vanessa invited him to her suite, a carefully curated escape that hinted at elegance without revealing her intentions. Jason followed eagerly, drunk on her charm, his inhibitions drowned in scotch and desire. When he finally left her suite in the early hours of the morning, he was none the wiser. As he stumbled into the elevator, Vanessa checked her phone, smiling at the notification confirming a transfer from his bank account to an anonymous account she controlled. Vanessa returned to her bed, stretching out luxuriously, already savoring the next conquest. For her, this wasn't just theft, it was a dance, an art. And she was just getting started. Chapter 2. Setting the Trap. Vanessa spent the following morning savoring the thrill of her success, the weight of Jason's stolen money giving her a heady sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about the cash, it was about the power, the control she held over men who saw themselves as kings in their own right. Jason had been the perfect mark, lonely, desperate, and foolishly trusting. But she knew that bigger prizes awaited, men who had far more to lose. She slipped into a quiet cafe, her disguise impeccable. Vanessa knew how to blend in when she needed to. Gone were the sultry dress and designer heels of last night, replaced by understated elegance. A soft blouse, a pair of jeans, and glasses that masked her striking eyes. Here she could be anyone, just another woman with a laptop and a cup of coffee. Vanessa's fingers flew over the keys as she typed, pulling up profiles on the men who frequented the penthouse bar, sorting through names, backgrounds, and the occasional scandal. She'd grown adept at sifting through digital footprints, piecing together who they were and how vulnerable they might be. As she delved into her research, she spotted her next target: Liam Cross, a tech mogul notorious for his fortune and his impulsive indulgences. Recently divorced with a penchant for high-stakes investments, Liam was precisely the kind of man who would fall for her charms. The first move was subtle: an email sent under a fake name, seemingly from a financial consulting firm, congratulating Liam on his recent business acquisition and offering him a free consultation for his high-value portfolio. Vanessa knew the words to catch his attention. She'd honed her language to cater to wealthy egos. By the time she hit send, She could already visualize his curiosity igniting. The next step was even simpler. She strolled into the penthouse bar that evening, this time dressed in understated elegance. A fitted black dress that whispered sophistication without shouting it. Men of Liam's caliber didn't fall for obvious temptresses. They wanted someone who appeared refined, intelligent, someone who seemed like an equal yet exuded mystery. Within an hour Liam was there taking his seat at the bar. Vanessa waited, her patience honed like the edge of a blade. She caught his eye, held his gaze just long enough, then looked away with a slight, knowing smile. The bait had been set. He approached her before she'd even ordered her first drink. Waiting for someone? His voice was smooth, his presence casual yet deliberately confident. Vanessa looked up, feigning surprise that anyone might dare disturb her solitude. She offered him a smile that was just shy of welcoming. I suppose I am. But perhaps they've arrived sooner than I expected. Liam chuckled, settling into the seat beside her, clearly intrigued. Vanessa could feel his gaze studying her, assessing her worth. Men like Liam thrived on challenges and she played her role to perfection, letting him chase, feeding his desire without revealing too much. In the coming days, Vanessa worked him with meticulous care. She became the perfect confidant, listening to him as he spoke of his latest ventures, his heartbreak over the divorce, his drive to build an empire. Liam had no idea that every word he uttered gave her more leverage. The more he trusted her, the closer she got to her prize. The night came when he invited her to his apartment. A sprawling penthouse that dripped with luxury from the marble floors to the glass walls overlooking the city. Vanessa moved through the space with practiced admiration, stroking the back of his hand, whispering words of appreciation into his ear. He was bewitched, hanging on her every word, unable to look away. When he left the room to grab a bottle of his finest champagne, Vanessa moved quickly. She'd come prepared with a sleek, encrypted USB drive that could upload a silent program onto his home computer. Within minutes, she'd have access to all his accounts, his passwords, everything she needed to transfer funds without leaving a trace. As Liam poured their glasses, Vanessa raised hers, her smile genuine in its triumph. She watched him, laughing lightly at his toasts and basking in the light of his adoration. But behind her eyes lay the thrill of a predator, knowing the trap had closed and her prey was none the wiser. By dawn, Vanessa had slipped out of his life, her presence like a whisper, leaving nothing behind but a stolen kiss and a hollowed bank account. Chapter 3 Warning Signs. Vanessa's morning ritual was simple. Coffee, a light breakfast, and a quiet moment to savor her victories. Liam Cross had been a rewarding conquest. His funds had flowed smoothly into her offshore accounts, and she'd left no trace of her presence behind. Yet, despite her thrill, a faint unease lingered. The day after her heist, Vanessa met Sophie at a small cafe downtown. Sophie Kane, her oldest friend, was her complete opposite. Blonde, soft-spoken and grounded in reality. She was the one person who knew Vanessa's secrets and dared to question her. So who's the latest victim? Sophie asked, raising an eyebrow as Vanessa sat down. Sophie's tone was playful, but her gaze was tinged with worry. Vanessa smiled, sipping her coffee nonchalantly. Let's just say he was worth every ounce of effort. Sophie sighed, shaking her head. You can't keep doing this forever, Vanessa. One of these days you're going to slip up. People notice things, even wealthy men. Vanessa laughed, brushing off the warning. Sophie, I've been doing this for years and I'm still here, aren't I? But it's different now, Sophie pressed. You're taking bigger risks, going after higher-profile targets. Detective Blake is starting to look into these cases. He's not stupid. Vanessa rolled her eyes. She'd heard about Detective Ryan Blake and his reputation for tenacity, but she didn't see him as a real threat. Ryan Blake is a small-time detective with a big ego. Besides, he has no proof and he never will. I'm always a step ahead, Sophie. Sophie looked at her friend, worry clouding her usually bright eyes. I just don't want to be the one picking up the pieces if something goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong. Vanessa's voice was firm. She reached across the table, giving Sophie's hand a reassuring squeeze. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. This is my art and I'm the best at it. But Sophie's words had left a small crack in Vanessa's confidence, a subtle shadow that trailed her for the rest of the day. She could brush it off, but deep down she knew Sophie had a point. Her marks were getting more complex and her web of deceit was growing harder to keep track of. Later that evening, Vanessa found herself at her apartment, sifting through emails and sorting out her finances. She was meticulous, storing each transaction under layers of encryption, confident in her digital fortress. But tonight her mind wandered back to Sophie's warning and the thought of Detective Blake, his name echoing in her mind. Blake had recently made headlines for his work on a major fraud case, bringing down a ring of scammers who had eluded authorities for years. He was known for his persistence, his unwillingness to let things go. Vanessa couldn't shake the thought that he might be more formidable than she'd initially assumed. She shook off the thought, forcing herself to focus. There was no room for doubt in her line of work. Doubt could lead to hesitation, and hesitation could ruin everything. Vanessa closed her laptop with a snap, standing and pacing her sleek apartment, trying to shrug off the weight that had settled over her. But as she stared out over the city lights, an uninvited thought lingered in the back of her mind. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe her growing list of conquests was drawing too much attention. Vanessa prided herself on her control, but this new feeling, this strange, unfamiliar doubt, left her unsettled. As she turned away from the window, Vanessa promised herself one thing. She'd lay low for a while, find a quieter mark next time. Just enough to quiet Sophie's concerns and keep Detective Blake at bay. But something told her it wouldn't be so easy. Chapter 4. Detective's Eye. Detective Ryan Blake sat hunched over a pile of files, his eyes narrowing as he scanned each page with unrelenting focus. The string of high-profile robberies had become his obsession, a personal challenge that had consumed him for months. It wasn't just the money, it was the sophistication of the crimes, the way each theft left no trail, no fingerprints, just emptied bank accounts and a string of men too embarrassed to admit how they'd been conned. But Blake had a gut feeling, an instinct born of years in the force, that connected these cases to one person. Each victim was the same, wealthy, unattached, vulnerable to the charms of a beautiful stranger. And though the men were reluctant to share details, he'd coaxed just enough from them to piece together a profile. This thief, he was certain, was no ordinary criminal. She was someone who knew exactly how to play her part, someone who slipped into her victims' lives like a shadow and disappeared without a trace. The latest case, involving Liam Cross, had provided the first real clue. Blake leaned back in his chair, reading through Liam's statement for the third time. Cross had been reluctant, embarrassed, but he'd mentioned a woman he'd met at the Penthouse bar, a woman who'd charmed him into bringing her home. The details matched too closely with other cases for it to be coincidence. And this time there had been a small slip. A security camera in the penthouse lobby had caught a blurred image of her face, half-turned, a wisp of dark hair escaping the shadows. Blake tapped his fingers on his desk, staring at the grainy image. He couldn't make out her features, but it was something, a starting point. He leaned closer, trying to piece together her look, her style, the way she moved. This woman wasn't just a thief. She was a professional, a master of manipulation. And Blake wasn't going to rest until he brought her down. He made a call to the Penthouse bar, requesting any information they had on recent guests, particularly those fitting her description. His voice was calm, polite, but inside a storm brewed. She was slipping up, and he could feel the thrill of getting closer. By the following evening, Detective Blake was at the bar himself, posing as a patron. He wore an unassuming suit, nothing too flashy but sharp enough to blend in. He positioned himself in a corner, watching the room as if he were any other man looking to unwind after a long day. His eyes scanned the patrons, noting details, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Hours passed and nothing. But he wasn't discouraged. He'd wait as long as it took. This was his case now. A personal vendetta against a ghost he was determined to bring into the light. Across the city, Vanessa had decided to take Sophie's advice. Well, almost. She wasn't planning to give up her life of thrill and control, but she had decided to move more carefully, biding her time and avoiding the usual haunts. But what Vanessa didn't know, what she couldn't have anticipated, was that Detective Blake was closer than he'd ever been. He was a predator circling his prey, unseen and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And in his mind he could already see her face, locked in a jail cell, that smug smile replaced by something else entirely, fear. Chapter 5. Past Shadows. Vanessa hadn't thought about Liam Cross since the night she'd emptied his accounts. He was just another man swept up in her web, another conquest easily discarded. But as she strolled down a bustling city street that evening, she felt something unsettling. A flicker of awareness, the feeling of eyes on her. She turned, scanning the crowd. Her gaze landed on a familiar figure, standing just beyond the glow of the streetlights. It was Liam. She hadn't expected to see him again, much less so soon after their brief orchestrated affair. Dressed in a tailored suit, his face held an intensity she hadn't noticed before. His expression wasn't of heartbreak or disappointment. It was colder, sharper. She realized with a jolt that he had found her intentionally. Vanessa's instinct was to turn away, to slip into the crowd and vanish. But Liam had seen her already, and she sensed he wouldn't let her go that easily. "Vanessa," he called, his voice calm but commanding, the tone of a man used to getting what he wanted. She forced herself to smile, transforming her features into a mask of polite surprise. "Liam, what a surprise. I didn't expect to see you here." His eyes didn't soften, and she could see the fury smoldering beneath his calm exterior. "I bet you didn't," he replied. "You disappeared without a trace. I thought we had something special." The word special dripped with sarcasm, and Vanessa felt her pulse quicken. She kept her face neutral, giving him a casual shrug. "Things moved fast, Liam. Sometimes it's best to leave things as they are." But he didn't back down. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Funny thing is, Vanessa, after you left, I noticed some things missing. Quite a few things, in fact. Money primarily. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" She kept her expression steady, but internally, alarms blared. It wasn't the first time a mark had caught on, but Liam's determination felt different, dangerous. "Liam," she began, injecting as much sincerity as she could into her voice, "I think you're mistaken. I've been careful to avoid any misunderstandings." "Oh, I understand perfectly," he said, his voice low, venomous. "You thought you could take me for a fool, walk away like I was nothing. But you're the one who underestimated me, Vanessa." She felt the cold edge of his threat, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I think you're being dramatic, Liam," she replied smoothly, giving him a pointed look. "It was just a fling. Let it go." He laughed, the sound bitter. "Oh, I intend to let it go, all right. But not without consequences." His tone held a promise, one that made her skin prickle. Vanessa managed a dismissive smile, but her heart pounded as she turned and walked away, forcing herself not to quicken her pace. She could feel his eyes on her back, the weight of his anger and determination like a shadow stretching over her. Liam Cross wasn't just a mark anymore. He was a threat, one she'd need to address before he could do real damage. As she disappeared into the crowd, she replayed the encounter in her mind, every word and gesture he'd made. Liam wasn't just bruised, he was vengeful. Her usual tricks wouldn't be enough to deal with him. She'd have to find a way to make him disappear one way or another. And while Vanessa didn't know it, her encounter with Liam had set off a series of events that would lead Detective Blake closer. With each step she took, she was leaving invisible footprints, signs she couldn't see but Blake would. The web she'd woven was beginning to tangle, its strands tightening around her as her enemies started to close in. This time it seemed she might not escape unscathed. Chapter 6. An Unexpected Ally. The encounter with Liam left Vanessa unnerved, but she didn't let it show. She reminded herself that she'd dealt with difficult situations before and had always come out on top. Still, as she slipped through her usual haunts over the next few days, she couldn't shake the sense of being watched. It was during one of these outings that she met Darren Holt. He was waiting for her in a shadowy corner of a high-end lounge, his demeanor both calm and calculated. Darren was lean and sharp-eyed, exuding a kind of quiet confidence that Vanessa recognized and respected. He'd once been a small-time thief himself, known in certain circles, though he'd recently fallen off the radar. She was surprised to see him reappear so suddenly. "Vanessa," he greeted her with a nod, his voice low and controlled. "We need to talk." Her guard went up immediately. "About what?" He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hear you've been getting sloppy. Some of your recent marks are starting to put things together. And I don't need to tell you that attention like that isn't good for either of us." Vanessa tilted her head, giving him a calculated smile. "You've been following my work, I see." "How flattering." Darren smirked. "I'm not here to flatter you. I'm here to offer you an alliance." "An alliance," she repeated, amused. "What makes you think I'd need an ally?" "Because I know about Liam Cross. I know he's looking for you. And I know that you don't have the resources to handle him alone. He replied, his tone serious. Vanessa's smile faltered. Darren was well informed, which meant he had been keeping tabs on her more closely than she'd realized. But she couldn't deny that an ally might be useful, especially someone with Darren's skills and connections. All right, she said finally, leaning in, her curiosity piqued. What exactly do you have in mind? Darren's eyes gleamed with interest. I want in on your next target. I know someone who's been working with Logan Pierce, that ruthless mogul you've probably heard of. He's wealthy, well-connected, and paranoid. But I think the two of us could get past his defenses. You'd get a cut and I'd get what I need from him. Vanessa knew of Logan Pierce, a powerful, secretive businessman whose wealth was rumored to stem from far more than legitimate ventures. He was a big fish, far riskier than her usual marks. But with Darren's intel, Logan might be within reach. And a target like that could mean enough money for her to disappear for good, escaping both Liam's revenge and Detective Blake's investigation. Interesting, she said finally, a spark of excitement igniting. But how do I know you won't double-cross me? Darren shrugged. You don't. But I have more to gain by working with you than against you. He paused, holding her gaze. Think of it as a business arrangement. If we work together, we both get what we want. Lone, you're a sitting duck. Liam and Detective Blake are already circling. Her stomach clenched at the mention of Detective Blake. Darren had been thorough in his research, far more thorough than she'd anticipated. And while she hated the idea of relying on anyone else, the reality was that Liam and Detective Blake were threats she couldn't dismiss. Fine, she said, her voice steady but guarded. We'll work together. But understand this. If you cross me, you won't get a second chance. Darren nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes. Fair enough. They clinked their glasses, sealing a dangerous partnership. As they discussed their plan, Vanessa felt a thrill course through her veins. Logan Pierce was an ambitious target, but if they succeeded, she'd have the funds to leave her old life behind, along with anyone who might come after her. But she couldn't shake the sense of unease Darren's warning had left her with. She was walking a razor's edge, and with each new alliance, each new target, she knew she was drawing closer to a line she couldn't uncross. For now, though, she focused on the challenge ahead, unaware that this alliance with Darren would set her down an even darker path, one where every step brought her closer to the shadow of her own destruction. Chapter 7. The Setup. Over the next few days, Vanessa and Darren meticulously crafted their plan to lure Logan Pierce. They knew he wouldn't be as easy to manipulate as the others. His reputation alone told them he was both ruthless and deeply suspicious of anyone he let into his inner circle. But with the right setup, they could draw him into a trap that would leave him vulnerable. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Darren had arranged a formal charity gala hosted by one of Logan's acquaintances, a high society event filled with the city's wealthiest and most influential figures. Vanessa's role was straightforward. Blend in, appear as an influential socialite, and catch Logan's attention without appearing to chase it. The gala would serve as a carefully orchestrated introduction, giving Vanessa a reason to linger in Logan's world just long enough to extract what they needed. On the night of the event, Vanessa slipped into a fitted emerald green gown that framed her silhouette, accentuating her allure without crossing the line into ostentation. She entered the grand ballroom with calculated poise, moving gracefully among the crowd, every step intentional. Her gaze occasionally drifted over the room, always lingering just long enough to notice Logan without staring. She could feel Darren's watchful eyes from a distance, a silent reminder that she wasn't in this alone. It didn't take long for Logan to notice her. He was taller than she expected, with a presence that commanded the room. His dark eyes scanned the crowd, sharp and observant, yet when they settled on her, they softened slightly with curiosity. She'd caught his attention. Logan approached, extending his hand in a smooth, deliberate motion. I don't believe we've met, he said, his voice rich and cultured, tinged with a faintly dangerous edge. Logan Pierce. Vanessa Sinclair, she replied, her voice warm yet measured. She met his gaze, offering him a smile that was both inviting and restrained, a promise without a commitment. They exchanged pleasantries, and Vanessa subtly steered the conversation towards his work, asking thoughtful questions that revealed her intelligence without showing too much knowledge of his affairs. Logan was intrigued, clearly unused to encountering someone who could meet him in a battle of wits. She played her role flawlessly, drawing him in with charm and mystery, each word carefully crafted to make him lower his defenses. As the evening progressed, she let him lead her through the conversation, feeding his ego while keeping her own presence strong enough to challenge him. Logan was used to being admired, even feared, but Vanessa's calm, confident demeanor seemed to unsettle him just enough. She could see it in his eyes, a flicker of surprise and intrigue as though he'd found something unexpected in her. By the end of the evening, Logan was hers. He didn't know it yet, but she had already started the wheels of the trap turning, setting him up to trust her, to invite her into his world. As they exchanged numbers and parted ways, Vanessa felt a surge of exhilaration. This was the beginning of her most ambitious scheme yet. Darren caught up with her as she exited the ballroom, his eyes alight with satisfaction. "You did well. He's hooked." Vanessa nodded, feeling the thrill of success but careful to mask it with her usual poise. "He's cautious though. We'll need to be patient." Darren's smile was tight, his excitement tempered by a dark edge. "Patience isn't a problem. But remember, Logan isn't like the others. He won't fall as easily. If he senses a trap, he'll turn on you in a heartbeat." She met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "I can handle him. I know what I'm doing." Darren studied her for a moment before nodding. "Good. Just don't get too comfortable. Men like Logan don't forgive betrayal." They parted ways, and Vanessa made her way back to her apartment, her mind buzzing with plans and contingencies. She knew Darren's warnings held merit, but she was confident in her abilities. She had never been outwitted, never been caught. And Logan Pierce, for all his wealth and power, was still a man susceptible to the same desires and vulnerabilities as the others. But as she slipped into bed that night, Vanessa couldn't shake a faint whisper of doubt. Logan was different. His intelligence, his intuition, there was something in him that unsettled her, a darkness that felt almost familiar. She brushed it aside, telling herself it was nothing more than nerves. Yet deep down, a part of her knew that Logan Pierce wasn't just another mark. He was a risk, one that could either elevate her to new heights or drag her into a dangerous game beyond her control. And in that moment, as the city lights flickered outside her window, Vanessa sensed that she was on the brink of something that would change her life forever. Only time would tell whether she would rise from this challenge or fall. Chapter 8. The game intensifies. In the days that followed the gala, Vanessa and Logan's interactions became more frequent. It started with casual texts, simple questions, witty exchanges, but quickly evolved into long late-night conversations. Vanessa played her part with precision, balancing intrigue and restraint, giving him just enough of herself to keep him invested. Logan was captivated, but he wasn't the type to reveal too much, and Vanessa knew she had to tread carefully. Logan was no fool. While he indulged her charm and seemed genuinely interested, there was a guarded quality about him that made Vanessa uneasy. He was observant, noticing small details, asking pointed questions about her life that required her to think fast. But she was a master of this art, skillfully weaving stories that gave him glimpses into a version of herself. A version crafted specifically to ensnare him. One evening, Logan invited her to his private club, a place nestled in the heart of the city's financial district. The club was luxurious yet discreet, frequented only by the city's elite. When Vanessa arrived, she found him waiting in a dimly lit corner, a glass of scotch in his hand, his eyes watching her with a calm intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Vanessa," he greeted her, standing as she approached. His voice was warm, but there was an underlying edge, as though he were sizing her up. "Logan," she replied smoothly, slipping into the seat across from him. She matched his gaze, meeting his intensity with her own. "This place is impressive. Exclusive." He offered her a slight smile. "I like exclusivity. It keeps the noise out." The conversation flowed naturally, a dance of wit and subtle innuendo. Vanessa allowed herself to relax just enough to draw him in, but her mind remained sharp, calculating each word, gauging his reactions. Logan talked about his investments, his travels, and the people he'd met, always in a way that hinted at the vast power he wielded. And though he didn't say it directly, Vanessa could tell that he was probing her, testing her in his own way. After an hour, Logan leaned in, his voice dropping slightly. "You intrigue me, Vanessa. Most people come into my life with a purpose, a reason. But I can't quite figure you out." She laughed lightly, tilting her head. And you think you can figure out everyone else? Usually yes, he replied, his gaze unwavering. But there's something different about you. Something I can't quite place. The words were a warning, though wrapped in charm. Logan wasn't a man who tolerated deception. He was used to control, and anything that eluded him only heightened his interest. Vanessa knew she needed to proceed carefully. Just enough mystery to keep him guessing, but not so much that he grew suspicious. Maybe that's why we get along so well, she said, smiling. I like a little mystery too. Their evening continued, and by the time she left the club, Vanessa could feel that she'd solidified her place in his life. Logan was intrigued, hooked just enough to start lowering his guard. But as she walked through the quiet streets back to her apartment, a faint unease lingered. The next day she received a message from Darren. We need to meet. No. They arranged to meet at a secluded park outside the city. Vanessa found him waiting by a bench, his expression tense. She knew he had been watching her progress with Logan closely, but something in his posture hinted that he had news she wouldn't like. Everything's on track with Logan, she said, sitting beside him, her tone confident. He's interested and he's starting to trust me. Darren looked at her, his gaze hard. You need to be careful. I've heard rumors, whispers from people who know Logan. He's not like anyone you've handled before. If he catches on. Vanessa brushed off his warning with a casual wave of her hand. He won't catch on. I have this under control. Darren leaned in, his voice low. Logan has connections to people. Dangerous people. People who don't ask questions before dealing with a problem. If he figures out you're after his money, he won't hesitate to eliminate you. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but she quickly masked it. I can handle him, she insisted, though Darren's words had ignited a small spark of fear. Darren sighed, shaking his head. Just remember, Vanessa. Logan is the kind of man who doesn't forgive betrayal. You need to be more cautious than you've ever been. Vanessa held his gaze, the weight of his warning settling in her chest. She knew Darren was right. Logan Pierce wasn't like her past marks. He was cunning, perceptive, and unafraid to use his influence to protect his empire. But she also knew that this was the opportunity of a lifetime, the score that would let her escape this dangerous game forever. As they parted, Vanessa felt a storm brewing on the horizon, a sense that she was walking a line more perilous than any before. But her ambition overpowered her fear. She was too deep in this game, too close to victory to back down now. Little did she know, Logan Pierce was already sensing her true intentions. Behind his warm smiles and charming words, he was setting his own trap, watching and waiting for the right moment to turn the game in his favor. And as Vanessa returned to her apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that this time, the stakes were higher than she'd anticipated. The game had intensified, and every step forward brought her closer to a confrontation she was not prepared to lose. Chapter 9. The Mysterious Stranger. As Vanessa continued to deepen her relationship with Logan, she noticed a shift in his behavior. He was attentive, charming, but there was a subtle intensity lurking beneath his smiles. He began asking more personal questions, probing her about her past and her ambitions, always in a way that seemed casual but felt pointed. She deflected where she could, weaving half-truths and carefully crafted stories, but each conversation left her feeling more exposed. Then one night, Logan invited her to an upscale jazz lounge, a hidden gem frequented by the city's elite. Vanessa arrived dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair pinned back, exuding sophistication. She found him waiting at a table near the stage, his gaze locked on her as she approached. Vanessa, he greeted her warmly, standing as she took her seat. His eyes held that familiar spark of intrigue, but tonight, there was something else. A sense of expectation, as though he were waiting for something specific from her. They ordered drinks, and Vanessa allowed herself to relax, letting the music and the dim lighting envelop her. They spoke about art, business, and philosophy, and for a while she felt the tension ease. But just as she was beginning to feel at ease, a woman appeared at their table. Logan, the woman said smoothly, her voice a blend of warmth and confidence. She was strikingly beautiful, with a cascade of dark hair and eyes that seemed to see right through Vanessa. I didn't expect to see you here. Logan's expression softened, a flicker of recognition lighting his features. Renee. It's been a while. Vanessa felt a prickle of unease as the woman turned her gaze toward her. There was something calculating in her expression, A silent assessment that made Vanessa feel exposed. "And who is this?" Renee asked, her tone friendly but with an undertone that felt almost predatory. Logan smiled, his hand resting lightly on Vanessa's shoulder. "This is Vanessa Sinclair. Vanessa, meet Renee Wolfe. An old friend." Vanessa extended her hand, meeting Renee's cool grip, sensing an unspoken challenge in the way the woman's fingers lingered before releasing. "It's a pleasure," Vanessa said, her tone polite yet guarded. "Likewise," Renee replied, her gaze lingering on Vanessa a moment too long before she turned her attention back to Logan. "I'll let you two enjoy your evening. Just wanted to say hello." With a parting smile, Renee drifted back into the crowd, her presence leaving a ripple of tension in her wake. Vanessa watched her disappear, a faint sense of unease settling in her stomach. As the evening wore on, she noticed Logan glancing toward the door more frequently, his focus divided. Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that Renee's presence was no coincidence, that she was somehow connected to Logan in a way he hadn't mentioned. On the drive back to her apartment, Vanessa replayed the interaction in her mind, dissecting every word, every look. Renee had seemed too familiar with Logan, too confident in her knowledge of him. It unsettled her, introducing a new layer of complexity to her already precarious position. Later that night she called Darren, her voice barely above a whisper. "I met someone tonight. Her name's Renee Wolfe. Do you know anything about her?" There was a pause before Darren replied. "I know a bit. Renee used to be close with Logan, they were partners once both in business and other ways. She's a dangerous one, Vanessa. Cunning, ruthless. If she suspects anything you need to be careful. Do you think she knows about me?" "She might," Darren replied grimly. "Renee doesn't trust easily and she's fiercely loyal to Logan. If she senses you're hiding something she won't hesitate to expose you. She has a reputation for playing people, manipulating situations to get what she wants. And if she sees you as a threat..." Vanessa's pulse quickened as Darren's words sank in. Renee Wolfe wasn't just another woman in Logan's circle. She was someone who could unravel everything if she decided to dig deeper. Vanessa had expected challenges, even danger, but she hadn't counted on facing someone as calculating as herself. "Stay close to her," Darren continued. "If you can win her over it might help. But if not, just keep your guard up. Renee's not one to take chances with." Vanessa ended the call, her mind racing. She was walking a tightrope, each step more treacherous than the last. Renee's arrival had shifted the dynamics, and Vanessa knew she couldn't afford a single misstep. Logan might be her ultimate target, but Renee was quickly becoming an obstacle she hadn't anticipated, a shadow that now loomed over her carefully constructed facade. As Vanessa lay in bed that night, staring at the city lights through her window, she felt the walls closing in. For the first time she began to wonder if this game was getting too dangerous, if she was in over her head. But as fear settled in her chest, another feeling rose to the surface, a stubborn resolve. She wasn't about to let someone like Renee Wolfe stand in her way. The stakes had just gotten higher, and Vanessa knew she'd need to be sharper, more cunning than ever to survive the game she'd started. And if Renee wanted a battle, Vanessa was more than ready to face her head-on. Chapter 10. Dangerous Liaisons. In the days following her encounter with Renee, Vanessa felt the shift in Logan's behavior. He was still warm, still charming, but there was a new guardedness, as if he were waiting for her to reveal some hidden truth. She knew it wasn't just her own moves he was scrutinizing. It was as though Renee's presence had awakened a new layer of suspicion within him. Vanessa needed to find a way to divert Logan's attention back to her, to re-establish control over the narrative she was weaving. She arranged a private dinner at an exclusive restaurant, booking the best table with a view over the city. It was designed to show Logan that she could provide him with an escape, a world outside his guarded walls. She needed him to feel safe, to let his guard down just enough for her to press forward with her plan. As the night progressed, they slipped into easy conversation, with Logan sharing stories of his youth and Vanessa playing the attentive listener. But tonight, Logan seemed to be steering the conversation in a more probing direction. "You know, Vanessa," he began, his tone casual but his eyes intense. "For someone as young and ambitious as you don't talk much about your own dreams. You've listened to mine, but what about yours?" Vanessa held his gaze, her mind racing. She hadn't expected him to turn the focus on her, especially not with that sharp intensity. Carefully, she crafted her response, a mixture of honesty and fiction that she hoped would satisfy his curiosity. "I guess I'm still figuring that out," she replied, letting a faint vulnerability creep into her tone. "I grew up wanting more than what I had, knowing I'd have to work twice as hard to get it. But no. I don't just want success. I want freedom, the kind of freedom that money can buy." Logan nodded, a knowing smile playing at his lips. Freedom can be elusive, especially in a world like ours. But it's worth pursuing. Still, freedom comes at a price. Are you prepared to pay it? Vanessa felt the weight of his words, a veiled warning that sent a chill down her spine. "I am," she answered quietly, her voice steady. "And I don't intend to let anything stand in my way." The rest of the evening continued smoothly, but the undercurrent of tension lingered. Logan's questions had struck a nerve, making her feel as if he were starting to see through her facade. But she remained calm, reminding herself that she was still in control, until a familiar face interrupted her thoughts. Renee Wolfe appeared at their table, her smile as sharp as ever. "Logan, Vanessa," she greeted them smoothly. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Vanessa forced a smile, feeling a prickle of irritation beneath her calm exterior. "Not at all, Renee. It's good to see you again." Renee's eyes flicked over her with a thinly veiled contempt, and she turned her attention back to Logan. "Logan, I wanted to discuss a potential business venture. I'm sure Vanessa won't mind if I steal you away for a moment." Logan looked at Vanessa, clearly conflicted. But before she could object, he rose, giving her an apologetic smile. "I'll be right back," he murmured, following Renee to a quieter corner of the room. Vanessa watched them, her smile tight as Renee leaned in close, her hand resting lightly on Logan's arm. She knew Renee was staking her claim, subtly marking Vanessa as an outsider. And as she observed their interaction, a sense of dread crept into her chest. She'd underestimated Renee. This wasn't just about Logan's loyalty or trust. It was a test, a challenge. Renee wanted to make it clear that she was in control, that Logan would never be entirely Vanessa's. When Logan returned, Vanessa masked her irritation, resuming their conversation as though nothing had happened. But the encounter had shifted something in her, filling her with a new sense of urgency. Renee was too close, too influential, and Vanessa knew she couldn't let her remain a threat. As they left the restaurant, Logan took her hand, pulling her close as they walked along the quiet street. He seemed to sense her tension, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. Vanessa managed a smile, nodding. "Just tired. It's been a long day." They walked in silence, Logan's arm wrapped protectively around her, but her mind was already racing. Renee wasn't just a rival. She was an obstacle that needed to be removed. Vanessa had dealt with threats before, but this was different. Renee had a foothold in Logan's life that Vanessa couldn't simply erase. That night, as she lay in bed, Vanessa devised a plan. She would need to be careful, calculated. Renee had connections, power, and a loyalty to Logan that wouldn't be easily broken. But Vanessa had something Renee didn't. She had Logan's intrigue, his curiosity, and the ability to manipulate his emotions. If she could turn him against Renee, create a seed of distrust, she could sever their bond without raising suspicion. The plan would be risky, a delicate game of misdirection and subtle persuasion. But Vanessa knew she was running out of time. With each passing day, Renee's presence became more of a threat, and Logan's suspicions seemed to grow. As dawn broke, Vanessa felt a fierce determination settle within her. She would play her hand carefully, weaving her web tighter around Logan, severing the ties that connected him to Renee. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival. The game had escalated, and Vanessa was prepared to do whatever it took to win. Even if it meant turning Logan's world upside down, manipulating the very fabric of his relationships. And as she drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in her mind. This time she'd have to outplay her rival or face losing everything she'd fought for. Chapter 11: Rising Stakes. Vanessa's plan to create a rift between Logan and Renee was already taking shape, but she knew it required patience and precision. If she pushed too hard, it would backfire. If she hesitated, Renee might strike first. She began subtly planting seeds, small observations dropped into conversations with Logan, carefully crafted to fuel his doubts without making him aware he was being manipulated. Their next meeting was at Logan's penthouse. Vanessa arrived dressed elegantly, her demeanor calm and confident, hiding the unease that had started to gnaw at her since Renee's arrival. Logan greeted her warmly, but she noticed a new guardedness in his expression, a hint of suspicion that hadn't been there before. As they settled onto his balcony with glasses of wine, Logan turned to her, his gaze intense. "I spoke to Renee yesterday," he said casually, swirling his wine. "She had some interesting things to say about you." Vanessa's heart skipped a beat, but she managed a faint smile. "Did she? Renee doesn't strike me as someone who enjoys discussing others." Logan studied her, his expression unreadable. "No, she doesn't. But she seems concerned." Concerned. Vanessa's voice was light, but inside her mind raced. Concerned about what exactly? Logan's gaze held hers. "She thinks I should be more careful about who I let into my life." His protective in her own way. Vanessa laughed softly, a sound that belied her tension. "Logan, you're one of the most powerful men in the city. I'm sure you're more than capable of deciding who to trust." He raised an eyebrow, considering her words. "True. But Renee isn't someone I take lightly. She's been in my life a long time." "Doesn't mean she's always right," Vanessa murmured, letting just a hint of skepticism edge her tone. "Sometimes people act out of jealousy or self-interest." Logan's expression shifted, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. Vanessa felt a surge of satisfaction but kept her face neutral. This was precisely what she needed. A tiny crack in his loyalty to Renee, a seed of doubt that would grow over time. She let the conversation drift away from Renee, drawing Logan back into easy conversation, making him laugh, keeping the mood light. But as the evening wore on, she could see the tension lingering in his gaze, a subtle preoccupation that hinted her words had found their mark. The following day, Vanessa decided to take the next step. She called Darren, knowing he'd be eager for an update on her progress with Logan. They met in a secluded cafe, Darren's expression sharp with anticipation. "Logan's starting to question Renee," Vanessa said, her voice low. "But it's not enough. She's still too close, still has too much influence over him." Darren leaned back, a faint smirk on his lips. "Then we'll need to accelerate things. I've been gathering information on her. Let's just say there's enough to make her look untrustworthy." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "You have dirt on her?" "More than enough," he replied, his tone smug. "She's involved in a few questionable deals, things Logan might not know about. If he thinks she's been hiding things from him, it could be enough to break that loyalty." Vanessa considered this, feeling a thrill of excitement. "Perfect. We can plant the information, make it look like he discovered it himself. But it has to be subtle, he can't know it came from us." Darren nodded, his eyes gleaming. "I'll take care of it. Just keep up your part. Make sure he's looking at Renee with suspicion." Over the next week, Darren executed the plan with precision, leaking small pieces of information that hinted at Renee's hidden dealings. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued her subtle manipulation, dropping casual observations and questioning Renee's motives whenever the opportunity arose. Logan seemed to grow increasingly distant from Renee, his trust wavering as the evidence against her piled up. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner, Logan finally opened up about his doubts. "It's strange, Vanessa," he said, his tone contemplative. "I thought I knew Renee, but lately things aren't adding up. I'm starting to wonder if I've been blind to some of her choices." Vanessa leaned forward, placing a gentle hand on his. "Sometimes people change. Or maybe they were never who we thought they were to begin with." Logan's eyes darkened, and she could see the turmoil in his expression. The rift was widening, the bond between him and Renee fraying with each word, each seed of doubt she planted. But as the plan unfolded, Vanessa couldn't shake a growing sense of danger. She was playing a high-stakes game, one that required flawless execution and unwavering control. Logan's trust in her was deepening, but she could feel him watching her more closely, sensing the complexity beneath her charm. And then on a cool autumn evening, Vanessa received a call from Renee. "Vanessa," Renee's voice was smooth, controlled, but Vanessa could hear the edge beneath it. "We need to talk. I believe you and I have some misunderstandings to clear up." Vanessa's heart pounded, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "Of course. When and where?" "Tomorrow." "My office," Renee replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Let's clear the air before things get complicated." As she ended the call, Vanessa felt a chill of anticipation. Renee wasn't just another player in Logan's life, She was a formidable opponent, someone who could see through her facade and strike if she found a weakness. The meeting would be a test, one that could either secure Vanessa's position or unravel everything she'd built. As she prepared for the encounter, Vanessa steeled herself, knowing she would have to be sharper, more ruthless than ever. This wasn't just a game of manipulation anymore. It was a battle and only one of them could come out on top. But Vanessa knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't go down without a fight. Chapter 12. Sibling Intervention. The next day Vanessa arrived at René's office, her nerves sharp but hidden beneath a composed exterior. The building was an imposing structure of steel and glass, mirroring the icy power that René seemed to exude effortlessly. Vanessa had prepared herself for every possible outcome, every angle of the conversation, determined not to let René find any weakness. René greeted her with a cool smile, her dark eyes studying Vanessa as they shook hands. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice polite but firm. "Please have a seat." Vanessa sat, matching René's composed demeanor, every move calculated to project confidence. She'd come here knowing that this conversation could either elevate her position or dismantle it entirely. René leaned back, crossing her legs gracefully as she fixed Vanessa with a piercing gaze. "I wanted to talk to you face to face," she began, her tone casual yet authoritative. "Logan seems quite taken with you. More than I would have expected." Vanessa smiled, refusing to let René intimidate her. "Logan and I have a good connection. I wasn't aware that required anyone else's approval." René's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Approval is one thing. Trust is another. Logan and I have a long history, Vanessa. I've seen people come and go, women who thought they understood him, who thought they could become a part of his life. None of them lasted. Maybe none of them were as compatible with him as I am," Vanessa replied smoothly, maintaining her poise. René tilted her head as if assessing her. "Or maybe you're overestimating your place. I don't need to tell you that Logan's world is complex. There are layers of loyalty, obligations, things he doesn't discuss with just anyone. People who threaten that order tend not to last." Vanessa held her gaze, feeling the unspoken threat in René's words. "I have no intention of being a threat to Logan. But I also won't be intimidated by someone who's afraid of losing her position." René's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "Careful, Vanessa. Confidence is one thing. Arrogance is another. Just remember, I see through people easily. And I can see that you're hiding something. Logan might be willing to overlook it, for now. But that can change." They locked eyes, a silent challenge passing between them. Vanessa's heart pounded, but she refused to break eye contact, her determination unwavering. She wouldn't let René scare her away. She'd worked too hard to get this far. After a tense silence, René leaned back, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Very well. I suppose we'll see how this plays out. But don't say I didn't warn you, Vanessa." With that, she dismissed Vanessa with a wave of her hand, signaling that their conversation was over. Vanessa rose, offering a polite nod before leaving, feeling the weight of René's gaze on her back as she exited the office. As she walked out of the building, Vanessa felt the tension release from her shoulders. She had survived the encounter, but the threat was far from over. René's words echoed in her mind, a reminder of the precariousness of her position. When she arrived back at her apartment that evening, she found herself facing another unexpected visitor, her estranged brother, Marcus Reid. He stood at her door, his expression unreadable, his presence an unwelcome reminder of a life she had left behind. "Marcus?" she asked, surprise and irritation mixing in her tone. "What are you doing here?" He sighed, looking her over with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "I heard about what you've been up to, Vanessa. The schemes, the manipulation. You're playing a dangerous game and it's going to get you hurt." Vanessa rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "I don't need a lecture from you, Marcus. You haven't been a part of my life in years." "Why the sudden concern?" "Because you're my sister," he replied, his voice filled with a sincerity she hadn't heard in years. "I know we haven't been close, but I still care about you. And I can see you're on a path that's only going to end in disaster." She let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. "I don't need saving, Marcus. I'm doing fine on my own. I know exactly what I'm doing." "Do you?" he countered, his eyes narrowing. "From what I've heard, you're in deep with some dangerous people. Logan Pierce isn't someone you play games with. And this René woman, she's even worse." They're not like your past marks, Vanessa. These people will destroy you if you push them too far. Vanessa's gaze hardened, her patience wearing thin. I'm not a child, Marcus. I don't need your advice or your concern. I've survived this long without you and I'll keep surviving. He stepped closer, his voice softening. Vanessa, I know we haven't had the easiest relationship, but please, just think about what you're doing. There's still time to get out, to leave all this behind. She shook her head, refusing to let his words sway her. This is my life, Marcus. And I'm not walking away from it. Not now, not ever. Marcus looked at her, a sadness settling in his eyes. I hope you know what you're doing, Vanessa. Because once you cross certain lines, there's no going back. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, his words lingering in the air like a warning. As she closed the door behind him, Vanessa felt a rare pang of doubt. Marcus's concern had touched a part of her she'd buried long ago, a reminder of the vulnerability she'd spent years erasing. But she brushed it aside, steeling herself. She was too far in now, too close to her goal to let anyone, even her own brother, pull her off course. Marcus's warning echoed in her mind, but she pushed it away, reminding herself of the life she'd chosen, the ambition that had driven her this far. The stakes were rising and she knew that the path ahead was more dangerous than ever. But Vanessa was determined. She had survived every obstacle life had thrown her way and she would survive this too. Or so she told herself as the shadows of doubt lingered in the corners of her mind. Chapter 13. Close Call. In the days following her confrontation with Renee and the unexpected visit from Marcus, Vanessa felt the pressure mounting. Every move felt scrutinized, every step more dangerous. Logan seemed as close as ever, his interest in her undiminished, but she could sense the guardedness still there, an invisible barrier she hadn't yet managed to break through completely. To complicate matters, Detective Ryan Blake was growing bolder in his pursuit. Unbeknownst to Vanessa, he had started piecing together her past marks, following her trail across the city's wealthiest circles. While his evidence was still circumstantial, he was convinced Vanessa was the mastermind behind a series of unsolved thefts and frauds. And now, with Logan Pierce in her sights, Blake was determined to catch her in the act. One evening, as Vanessa walked down a dimly lit street on her way home, she felt a familiar sensation. A shadow, a sense that someone was following her. She quickened her pace, keeping her posture calm and composed, while her mind raced with possibilities. She'd been careful, always maintaining her disguises, keeping a low profile in public spaces. But paranoia was a part of her life and tonight it felt stronger than usual. As she turned the corner, she heard footsteps echo behind her, steady and unyielding. She kept walking, her heartbeat quickening, her mind calculating escape routes. She glanced back briefly and caught a glimpse of a man in a dark coat, his face shadowed by the dim streetlights. She recognized him immediately, Detective Ryan Blake. Vanessa forced herself to remain calm, slipping into an alleyway and quickening her pace. She'd prepared for this eventuality, always keeping an escape plan in mind. Her pulse raced as she moved, blending into the shadows, her mind focused on losing him without drawing suspicion. Blake was relentless, though, closing in as she weaved through side streets. It was only when she ducked into a narrow passage between buildings that she managed to lose him. She waited in silence, her back pressed against the cold wall, listening to his footsteps fade away. Once the silence settled around her, Vanessa allowed herself a breath of relief. But the close call had left her shaken. Detective Blake was getting too close, his presence a reminder that her web was fraying, that the life she'd built was starting to crumble under scrutiny. She hurried home, her thoughts racing. She couldn't afford any more mistakes. Blake's persistence was growing dangerous, and if he managed to uncover any link between her and Logan, everything would be over. That night she lay in bed, her mind restless. The thrill that had once driven her was now tainted by the constant threat of exposure. She was walking a fine line, and with every new ally, every new deception, the line became harder to navigate. The next morning, Vanessa received a message from Logan, inviting her to his penthouse that evening for a surprise. Normally she would have been thrilled by his invitation, another step toward securing his trust, but after last night's close call she felt uneasy. Still, she knew she couldn't afford to refuse. Logan was her key to freedom, the final piece of her plan. So she dressed carefully, choosing a dress that was elegant yet understated, something that would remind him of her sophistication without appearing too calculated. When she arrived at his penthouse, Logan greeted her with a smile, his demeanor warm, but his eyes held an unreadable glint. He led her to the balcony, where a table was set with candles and an assortment of carefully prepared dishes. The city lights glittered below, casting a romantic glow over the scene. "I thought we could have a private dinner," Logan said, pouring them both glasses of wine. "You've been on my mind a lot lately, Vanessa. I wanted tonight to be special." Vanessa smiled, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. They talked over dinner, their conversation flowing easily, but there was a subtle edge to Logan's questions, a hint of something lurking beneath his words. Halfway through the meal, Logan set down his glass and looked at her, his gaze penetrating. "Vanessa, I have to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." She felt her heart skip, but she managed a calm nod. "Of course, Logan. Ask me anything." He hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "Do you trust me?" The question took her by surprise, a curveball she hadn't anticipated. She forced herself to hold his gaze, her expression steady. "Yes, Logan. I do." He watched her for a moment longer, and then his expression softened, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Because trust is everything to me, Vanessa. Without it we have nothing." Relief washed over her, but her mind remained alert. Logan's questions were growing too personal, his scrutiny too intense. She could feel the boundaries tightening, as if he were testing her resolve, waiting for her to reveal something hidden. As they finished the evening, he walked her to the door, his hand lingering on hers as he said goodnight. But before she left, he leaned close, his voice low. "I've enjoyed our time together, Vanessa. I can trust you with my world." She met his gaze, her smile unwavering. "You can trust me, Logan." "Completely." But as she left his penthouse, Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. Logan's guarded demeanor, Detective Blake's pursuit, and Renee's lurking presence. They were all pieces of a puzzle that seemed to be assembling against her. And for the first time as she walked away from Logan's building, she wondered if the game she had set in motion was one she could no longer control. The stakes had risen, and Vanessa knew that her next steps would determine whether she emerged victorious, or whether she would be the one left vulnerable, her carefully woven world shattered. Chapter 14. Darren's Betrayal. The following day, Vanessa received a message from Darren. "Meet me at the warehouse on 8th Avenue. We need to talk, urgent." Something in the message felt wrong. Darren was careful, never using words like urgent without reason, and the warehouse on 8th was their most secluded meeting place, reserved only for the highest-risk conversations. Vanessa's instincts told her to be wary, but she had little choice. She knew Darren wouldn't summon her there without cause, and if there was a new development in their plan against Logan or Renee, she needed to know. She arrived at the warehouse just after dusk, the area silent except for the occasional sound of distant traffic. As she stepped inside, she found Darren waiting, leaning against a stack of crates, his expression tense. The shadows cast strange angles on his face, making him look harder, almost predatory. "Vanessa," he greeted her, his voice clipped. "Thanks for coming." "What's this about?" she asked, scanning his face for clues. Darren's eyes held an edge of something she couldn't quite place. Anger, perhaps, or maybe something darker. "We need to talk about your priorities," he said, pushing off the crates and stepping closer. "Logan. Renee. This whole plan you've got going. It's spiraling out of control." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, masking her unease with calm. "I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's on track." "On track?" Darren let out a sharp laugh, his eyes narrowing. "Are you so blinded by ambition that you don't see what's happening? Logan's getting suspicious, Renee's circling you like a hawk, and let's not forget your new admirer, Detective Blake. You think this is still under control?" Her eyes flashed, but she kept her voice steady. "I can handle them. We're closer than ever. All I need is a little more time." Darren shook his head, a look of disdain crossing his face. "Time? Time's the one thing you don't have, Vanessa. You're pushing too hard, getting reckless. And it's only a matter of time before one of them sees through you." She took a step closer, her tone icy. "I didn't come this far to be lectured by you, Darren. I'm not walking away." "Maybe you should," he shot back, his voice colder than she'd ever heard it. "Because if you don't, I might have to make a choice of my own." Vanessa's stomach twisted, a chill settling over her as she realized what he was saying. Are you threatening me? Darren's lips curled into a smirk. Call it whatever you want. Logan's on to you, Vanessa. If he catches wind of this game you're playing, he won't come after me. He'll come after you. And I don't intend to go down with you. She stared at him, the depth of his betrayal sinking in. Darren, her so-called ally, the one person she'd trusted in this entire scheme, was preparing to turn on her. He'd been watching her unravel, biding his time, waiting for the moment when she became a liability. You think you can just walk away? She asked, her voice low and venomous. After everything? Darren's expression hardened. I think I can survive. Which is more than I can say for you if you don't pull yourself together. Here's the deal. You let me out of this, I won't mention your name. I'll tell Logan it was all you. Vanessa's mind raced. She couldn't afford to let Darren walk away, not with everything he knew. He was the only one who understood the full extent of her plan, who had the power to ruin her with a single word. She took a step back, her face cold. You're a coward, Darren. I should have known you'd betray me the moment things got difficult. Darren's expression didn't falter. Call me what you want. But at least I know when to cut my losses. Think about it, Vanessa. You've got two choices here. Either let me walk away quietly, or I'll make sure Logan hears the truth. She felt trapped, fury and desperation twisting together inside her. She'd always known Darren was ruthless, but she hadn't anticipated the extent of his self-preservation. In that moment, Vanessa understood that she couldn't trust anyone. Not Darren, not Logan, not even herself. She forced herself to remain calm, nodding slowly. Fine. If you want out, then get out. But remember, Darren, I know just as much about you as you know about me. If you cross me, it won't end well for either of us. For a moment they stared each other down, two predators locked in a silent, deadly stalemate. Then Darren gave a short nod, his eyes cold. Then I guess we're done here. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty warehouse. Vanessa watched him go, a fire burning in her chest. Darren's betrayal had left her more vulnerable than ever, with no one left to trust, no one she could rely on. As she left the warehouse, Vanessa felt the weight of her decisions bearing down on her, the enormity of her choices pressing in from all sides. She was alone now, entirely alone and surrounded by enemies. She knew that she couldn't let Darren walk away unscathed. She couldn't allow him to become yet another threat, another loose end. But she also knew that handling him would require finesse, a level of caution she hadn't yet employed. Her mind churned with possibilities, strategies as she returned to her apartment. Darren had betrayed her and Logan was watching her closely. Renee lurked in the background, Detective Blake was circling in closer, and now her only ally had turned against her. As she stared out the window at the city lights, Vanessa felt the enormity of her choices crashing down around her. Every step she took was leading her deeper into a trap of her own making, a web she was struggling to control. But if this was the endgame, then she'd play it on her terms. Darren's betrayal had given her no other choice. Tomorrow she'd begin to lay the groundwork for her next move, the final move. She'd cut ties, burn bridges, and eliminate anyone who dared stand in her way. Because one thing was certain. If Vanessa was going down, she wasn't going down alone. Chapter 15. Unraveling Secrets. Vanessa wasted no time implementing her next move. Darren had forced her hand and she knew she couldn't leave him unchecked. But the betrayal had shaken her more than she cared to admit. He knew too much, and as long as he was free, he was a threat, a ticking time bomb that could ruin everything she'd built. Her first task was to turn Logan's suspicions toward Darren. She crafted a story in which Darren was the one scheming, using her as a pawn to get close to Logan. It wasn't far from the truth, and she knew Logan's guarded nature would make him receptive to the idea. She just needed to plant the seed subtly. That evening, Vanessa joined Logan at his penthouse, bringing along a bottle of his favorite whiskey, a peace offering, one that hinted at intimacy. She knew Logan would read between the lines, see her presence as a gesture of trust. They shared drinks on his balcony, overlooking the city, the silence between them filled with tension. Finally, she took a deep breath and began. Logan, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about, she said, her tone carefully measured. He glanced at her, his gaze wary but attentive. Go on. It's about Darren, she said, feigning reluctance. I don't know if I should even bring this up, but I feel like you should know. Logan's eyes darkened. What about him? He approached me recently, she continued, lowering her gaze as if hesitant. He wanted me to help him get close to you. I don't know his full intentions, but it felt wrong. Like he was using me. Logan studied her, his face unreadable. And why are you telling me this now? Because I care about you, she said softly, meeting his gaze. I didn't want to believe he could betray you like this, but I can't ignore what I've seen. For a long moment Logan said nothing, his gaze fixed on the city lights. Vanessa's heart pounded, but she maintained her calm facade, waiting for him to process her words. Finally he sighed, setting his glass down. Darren has always been ambitious. I should have seen this coming. Vanessa placed a gentle hand on his arm. I didn't want to be the one to tell you. But I couldn't stand by and watch him use us both. Logan nodded, his expression hardening. Thank you for telling me, Vanessa. I'll handle Darren. A surge of relief washed over her, but she kept her expression neutral. She knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The game was still in motion and any misstep could be her undoing. Over the next few days Logan began distancing himself from Darren, and Vanessa took every opportunity to reinforce his doubts. But as she continued to pull the strings, she sensed that something was still off. Renee's influence over Logan hadn't waned, and Detective Blake's presence loomed ever closer, his investigation narrowing in on her movements. One evening as she returned to her apartment, Vanessa found an envelope slipped under her door. Her name was written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. She tore it open, her hands steady despite the growing sense of dread. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that chilled her to the bone. I know what you're doing, Vanessa. And I know who you are. Her breath caught as she read the words, her mind racing. Who could have sent this? Darren as a final threat? Renee discovering more than Vanessa had intended? Or worse, Detective Blake closing in on her? She forced herself to think rationally. The message didn't reveal much, but it was a clear warning. Whoever had sent it wanted her to know she was being watched, that her web of deception was no longer invisible. In the days that followed, Vanessa's paranoia deepened. She moved with caution, double-checking her surroundings, anticipating every possible angle of betrayal. Her once solid world was unraveling faster than she could patch it up, and the fear gnawed at her, a constant reminder that her empire of lies was on the verge of collapse. Desperate for answers, she reached out to Marcus. Though she had dismissed him before, her brother was the only person left she could turn to for help, someone who might understand the darkness that had crept into her life. They met at a quiet cafe, Marcus's expression a mixture of concern and frustration. Vanessa, what's going on? Why are you dragging me back into this mess? She glanced around to make sure they weren't being watched, then leaned in, her voice low. I need your help. Someone knows what I've been doing. They left a message. I don't know who it was, but I need to find out. Marcus sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. You need to leave this life behind, Vanessa. It's not worth it. I don't have a choice, she replied, her voice filled with a desperation she couldn't hide. Not anymore. You're the only one I can trust. He looked at her, his gaze softening. Fine. But you need to be honest with me. Everything. No more lies. Reluctantly, she nodded, telling him about Darren's betrayal, Renee's constant suspicion, and her fragile relationship with Logan. She withheld some details, careful to protect herself, but she shared enough to make Marcus understand the gravity of her situation. When she finished, Marcus sat back, a troubled look in his eyes. You're in deep, Vanessa. Deeper than you realize. If this person knows who you are, you're already at risk. You can't keep lying to everyone. Vanessa's gaze hardened. I know what I'm doing. I just need you to help me find out who left that note. Marcus sighed, glancing out the window. Fine. But promise me once we find out who it is, you'll end this. Walk away before it's too late. Vanessa forced a smile, a hollow gesture that didn't reach her eyes. Sure, Marcus. I'll walk away. But deep down she knew she couldn't make that promise. She was too entangled, too invested. She couldn't walk away, not with everything she'd fought to achieve. As Marcus left, Vanessa felt a sliver of hope. She might have lost Darren, but she had gained Marcus's loyalty, a small, fragile thread of support in her dark, twisted game. But as she returned to her apartment that night, she found herself haunted by the message, by the invisible eyes watching her every move. And she knew that her time was running out. Chapter 16. The Trap Closes. With Marcus's help, Vanessa felt a glimmer of hope. She was closer to unmasking the person who had left the chilling message, and Marcus's loyalty, despite his reluctance, provided her with the first true ally she'd had in a long time. Yet with each passing day the sense of being hunted grew. It was as if every lie, every deceitful maneuver, was closing in on her. One evening, as she reviewed her plans, a text message lit up her phone screen. "Meet me at the rooftop bar at midnight. We need to talk, Logan." Vanessa's heartbeat quickened. Logan had grown distant since she'd planted the seeds of distrust about Darren, but his trust in her had seemed to strengthen. She wondered what he could want to discuss so late and on a rooftop no less. At midnight she arrived at the rooftop bar, greeted by a view of the sprawling city lights beneath a dark clouded sky. Logan was waiting for her by the railing, his silhouette sharp against the skyline, his posture tense. "Logan," she greeted, her voice light but cautious. "What's this about?" He turned to her, his face unreadable, his eyes colder than she'd ever seen. "I needed to see you," he said slowly, his tone clipped. "There are things I've been wondering about." Vanessa swallowed, forcing herself to remain calm. "What's on your mind?" He held her gaze, his expression hard. "I've been thinking about Darren, about the things you told me. And something isn't adding up." Her mind raced. Had Darren managed to plant a counter-story? Had Renee's suspicions reached him? "Logan, I told you everything I knew," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "If you're questioning me now—" "Oh, I'm questioning everything," he interrupted, his voice steely. "Including you." Vanessa's pulse quickened, but she held his gaze, refusing to show fear. "What are you trying to say?" He stepped closer, his expression dark. "I've been watching you, Vanessa. Your stories, your past, they don't make sense. You slipped up, left loose ends. And now I'm wondering who you really are." Her heart pounded, but she met his gaze, masking her fear with a calm facade. "Logan, I thought you trusted me." "I thought—" "Trust." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Trust is something you earn, something you prove. And you haven't done that." He took another step closer, his face inches from hers. "You came into my life like a storm, Vanessa. Captivating, charming. But now I see through the smoke. You're hiding something, and I want to know the truth." She could feel the danger in his words, the weight of his suspicion bearing down on her. She knew she had to think quickly, to find a way to salvage his trust, to divert his attention. "Logan, I don't know where this is coming from," she said softly, trying to infuse her voice with sincerity. "But if you're questioning me, then maybe we're both guilty of not trusting each other enough." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unyielding, searching for cracks in her composure. "Then tell me, Vanessa," he said, his voice a whisper filled with menace. "Who are you?" In that moment, Vanessa realized she couldn't lie her way out. Logan had been watching, piecing together fragments of her deception. And if he discovered the truth, her carefully woven life would unravel completely. So she did the only thing she could think of. She leaned in, placing her hand lightly on his chest, her voice soft, vulnerable. "Logan, I have a past, yes. But so do you. Maybe I made mistakes, maybe I'm not perfect. But being with you, it's the only thing that's felt real." For a moment he hesitated, his expression softening. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the battle between his suspicion and his desire for her. But before he could speak, another figure stepped out of the shadows. A figure she recognized instantly. Detective Ryan Blake. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "But I think we're long overdue for a conversation, Vanessa." Her stomach dropped. She turned to Logan, his gaze now colder than ever, realization dawning on his face. Detective Blake's appearance confirmed every doubt he'd had about her. "Vanessa Reid," Blake continued, stepping closer, "or should I say Vanessa Sinclair. Quite a story you've spun here, charming your way into Logan's life, deceiving everyone in your path. But the game's over." Vanessa's mind raced, her options narrowing. She could see Logan's hurt and anger, his face a mix of betrayal and rage. Her perfect plan had unraveled in a matter of minutes, and now her past lay bare before both men. "Logan, listen to me," she began, but he cut her off, his voice like ice. "Save it," he snapped, his expression stony. "You lied to me, used me. I should have seen this coming." Detective Blake moved in closer, his tone almost sympathetic. "Vanessa, it's time to stop running. We've got enough to charge you with fraud, theft and more." You can come quietly or we can make this harder than it needs to be. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Every word, every plan, every calculation had come crashing down. But Vanessa Reid wasn't someone who went down without a fight. With a quick glance around, she spotted a narrow pathway leading to the fire escape. Without hesitation, she spun and bolted, her heels clicking against the rooftop as she sprinted toward the edge. She heard Detective Blake shout behind her, but she kept running, adrenaline fueling her escape. As she reached the fire escape, she climbed down, moving faster than she'd ever moved, her heart pounding. She heard Blake's footsteps behind her, relentless, but she was driven by sheer survival. The city lights blurred as she navigated the fire escape, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. She couldn't go back, couldn't face the wreckage of her life. All she had now was the instinct to survive, to evade the collapse of everything she'd built. At the bottom of the fire escape, Vanessa darted into a narrow alley, blending into the darkness. The sounds of Blake's pursuit faded, and she finally allowed herself to breathe, her mind reeling. She was alone now, completely and utterly alone, her web of deceit torn apart. But even as she slipped into the shadows, she knew one thing: Vanessa Reid wasn't finished. Not yet. As the night deepened, she vanished into the city, a hunted woman with nothing left but her wits, her charm, and a desperate will to survive. Chapter 17. Final Play. Vanessa moved through the city like a ghost, slipping between alleyways, her mind racing with only one thought: escape. She knew her options were limited. With Detective Blake and Logan both aware of her deception, she had nowhere left to hide. Yet something inside her refused to give in. She'd survived too many close calls to go down without a fight. She found refuge in a rundown motel on the city's outskirts, a place so forgotten that no one would think to look for her there. She spent the night replaying every move, every mistake. The rooftop confrontation haunted her, the look on Logan's face, his disappointment, his anger. She'd misjudged him, misjudged how deeply he could cut her down. And now, Blake was circling closer with more than enough to destroy her. The next morning she made her decision. If she was going to escape this, she needed one last play, one final chance to turn the tables. She couldn't let Darren's betrayal, Blake's pursuit, and Logan's scorn dictate her downfall. She'd have to take control even if it meant risking everything. Her plan was bold, perhaps even desperate, but she had no choice. She would go straight to Logan. She would give him the truth, not the polished lies or manipulations, but the raw, unvarnished truth. If she could convince him just one last time, she might stand a chance. That evening, under the cover of darkness, Vanessa slipped back into the city. She knew Logan would be at his penthouse. It was his sanctuary, the one place he'd retreat to while nursing his wounds from her betrayal. She'd memorized his routines, his security measures, every detail that could get her inside undetected. Slipping into the building through the service entrance, she avoided the guards, navigating the halls with practiced stealth. When she reached his penthouse, she took a breath, steadying herself before she unlocked the door. Inside, the room was quiet, the dim lights casting long shadows. She found him by the balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. "Logan," she said softly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. He turned, his expression hardening as he saw her. "You've got some nerve coming here," he said coldly, setting his glass down. "I don't have a choice," she replied, stepping closer. "I came to explain." "Explain," he scoffed, his voice thick with bitterness. "I trusted you, Vanessa. I let you into my life and you played me for a fool." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I did what I had to survive. I know I've hurt you, but I need you to understand, it was never about you. It was about escaping a life I never wanted." Logan's expression softened just slightly, but the wariness remained. "Then why did you come back? Why not keep running?" "Because running isn't going to save me," she said, her voice trembling with honesty. "The walls are closing in, Logan. Detective Blake is after me, Darren betrayed me, and I have no one left. I thought I could handle it all, but I was wrong." He studied her, his eyes dark and unyielding. "So you came here hoping I'd save you?" "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I came here because I have nothing left to lose. And I needed you to know the truth." For a long moment he didn't respond, his gaze searching her face. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the battle between anger and the lingering remnants of what they once had. Finally he sighed, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. "Why should I believe anything you say?" he asked quietly. "Because I'm done lying," she replied, her voice raw with sincerity. "This is me, Logan, all the mess, all the mistakes. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know that whatever you felt, whatever we had, it was real." Silence hung between them, thick with unspoken words and shattered trust. Finally Logan spoke, his tone softer. "Then tell me everything. No more games, no more lies." And so she did. She told him everything. The schemes, the deception, the thrill of the con, and the desperation that had driven her to this point. She confessed her darkest secrets, leaving nothing hidden, exposing herself entirely. As she spoke, she felt a strange sense of release, as if unburdening herself of the lies was the only way to find peace. When she finished, Logan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You're a dangerous woman, Vanessa," he said, his voice low. "But I can't deny there was something real between us." She held his gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "I wish things had been different." Logan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's a way out of this for you. But it's going to come at a cost." She looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I can help you disappear, give you a chance to start over. But you'll have to leave everything behind. No more schemes, no more lies." Vanessa nodded, her heart pounding. "I'll do it. I'll leave it all behind." But before they could finalize their plan, the door to the penthouse burst open. Detective Blake strode in, his expression triumphant. "Game's over, Vanessa. You're coming with me." Logan stepped between them, his voice cold. "You can't arrest her without a warrant." Blake smirked, holding up a folded paper. "Got that covered." Vanessa's heart sank, but she forced herself to stay calm. She'd come too far, fought too hard to let it end this way. She glanced at Logan, her eyes pleading. Logan looked at Blake, his expression fierce. "She's not a monster, Blake. She's made mistakes, yes, but she deserves a chance." Blake sneered. "She's a thief, Logan. A con artist who's left a trail of destruction. She doesn't get to walk away from this." Vanessa swallowed, her voice steady. "I know what I did was wrong. But I'm done with that life. Please, let me go." For a long, tense moment, Blake considered her words. Then he shook his head, his expression unyielding. "I'm afraid that's not up to you." As he moved forward, Logan glanced at her one last time. "Run," he whispered. Without hesitation, Vanessa bolted for the balcony, climbing over the edge and gripping the fire escape. She heard Blake shout behind her, but she didn't stop, her survival instincts taking over. She descended quickly, adrenaline fueling her every movement, her only thought to escape. When she hit the ground, she didn't look back. She disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind the life she'd known, the man she'd loved, and the wreckage of her choices. And as she vanished into the city, she felt a strange sense of freedom, haunted by her past, yet finally free from the tangled web she'd woven. But she knew one thing for sure. Vanessa Reid was gone. In her place was a woman determined to survive, no matter what the cost. Chapter 18. The Deadly Mistake. Vanessa didn't stop running until the city lights blurred into darkness. She found refuge in a deserted train station on the outskirts, hiding among shadows, her mind racing. Logan's words echoed in her ears. Run. He had let her go, given her a chance to escape, but she knew this reprieve was temporary. Detective Blake would use every resource to track her down. As dawn broke, Vanessa boarded the first train heading out of the city, settling into a back corner of an empty car. Her mind replayed the events of the previous night. Logan's unexpected mercy, Blake's relentless pursuit, the shattered remains of everything she'd built. But beneath the fear, a new resolve took root. She was free from the lies, the schemes, and the need to control everything. For the first time, she was running not to deceive but to survive. 4 days, Vanessa moved from town to town, surviving on little, her instincts sharper than ever. But as she drifted through crowded streets and anonymous motels, she began to feel something else. A shadow, a presence that lurked just out of sight. The feeling she'd had before, the sense of being watched, returned stronger than ever. One evening, in a quiet diner far from the city, Vanessa sat alone, sipping coffee and scanning the room. Her eyes landed on a man in a corner booth, watching her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. He was unremarkable, a rugged face, plain clothes, but something in his gaze made her heart race. When she looked again, the man was gone, leaving a single folded note on his table. Her pulse quickened as she reached for it, reading the familiar, chilling words. "I know what you're doing, Vanessa. And I know who you are." A cold dread settled in her stomach. She'd thought Detective Blake was her only pursuer, but this message was different, intimate. Whoever had been tracking her had found her again. Vanessa left the diner immediately, slipping into the night, adrenaline fueling her escape. She knew she couldn't keep running aimlessly. She needed a plan, somewhere safe, somewhere this shadow couldn't reach her. Her instincts drove her toward the coast, to a small, isolated town with a single modest motel. She booked a room under an assumed name, feeling a momentary sense of relief. But as she settled in, the tension lingered. She was safe, but for how long? Late that night, a knock sounded on her door, soft yet unmistakable. Her heart froze. She hadn't told anyone she was here. She rose slowly, pressing her ear to the door, straining to hear any movement. "Vanessa," a voice called out, low and menacing. It was the man from the diner. Fear pulsed through her, but she steeled herself. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her. "You've been slipping through people's fingers for a long time," he replied. "Detective Blake, Logan, even your old partner Darren. But you won't escape me." Her hands clenched into fists. She couldn't let herself be cornered. She looked around the small room, spotting the fire escape just outside the window. Her survival instincts kicked in, and she threw the window open, clambering out onto the metal ledge. As she climbed down, she heard footsteps following her inside. She hit the ground running, sprinting into the dark streets of the deserted town. The footsteps echoed behind her, relentless, drawing closer with every turn she took. Desperation fueled her as she veered down an alleyway, searching for an exit, but she found herself trapped. A dead end. She spun around, chest heaving, and saw the shadowy figure step into the alley, his face illuminated briefly by a flickering streetlight. It was the man from the diner, his expression cold, devoid of mercy. "Did you really think you could run forever, Vanessa?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "What do you want?" she asked, backing against the wall, every nerve in her body on high alert. "I'm here to finish what others couldn't," he replied, his gaze icy. "You've crossed too many lines, hurt too many people. It was only a matter of time before someone caught up with you." Vanessa's mind raced, searching for a way out, but she was cornered, her options dwindling. She'd built a life on deception, manipulation, always believing she was the one in control. But now she was at the mercy of someone who saw through every trick, every disguise. With a final surge of defiance, she squared her shoulders. "I may have made mistakes, but I'm not afraid of you." The man smirked, stepping closer. "Fear doesn't matter, Vanessa. You chose this path." And with that he lunged. Vanessa fought back, her instincts sharp, but she was no match for his strength. She struggled, kicking, clawing, refusing to go down easily. But his grip was unyielding, his intent clear. In her last moments, her mind flooded with fragments of the life she'd left behind. The faces of those she'd hurt, the memories of a love she'd betrayed, the price she'd paid for control. As the world around her dimmed, Vanessa felt a strange sense of release. She had spent her life running, manipulating, surviving by any means necessary. And now, at the end of it all, the weight of her choices fell away, leaving only silence. When dawn broke over the small coastal town, Vanessa Reid was gone, her legacy scattered like ashes on the wind. In the city, Detective Blake closed his case file on the infamous Vanessa Reid, his expression unreadable as he scribbled a final note. Logan Pierce, too, would receive the news. A single, unceremonious message that the woman who had captivated and betrayed him was no longer a threat. And somewhere in the shadows, the man who had tracked her to the end vanished into the morning mist, leaving no trace. Vanessa Reid's story had ended, a tale woven with seduction, manipulation, and ambition, brought to a close by the same forces she had wielded so skillfully. She had played the game until the very end, and though she had lost, she left behind a legend, a haunting reminder of the power and peril of living in the Silken Shadows. Epilogue: Silken Shadows. News of Vanessa Reid's death traveled quickly through the circles of those who had once known her, leaving a wake of silence and contemplation in its path. Detective Ryan Blake closed his files on her with a sense of closure, yet an odd emptiness lingered. a reminder of the countless hours he'd devoted to unraveling her schemes. She had been one of his most complex cases, a ghost who danced through lives, leaving both allure and ruin in her wake. Her file remained on his desk for a while longer than usual, a mark of respect for a game that had been as much of a chase as it was an unspoken rivalry. For Logan Pierce, the news hit like a shadow creeping into his life. He had been drawn to Vanessa's audacity, her charm, even her deception. She had been dangerous, yes, but she had also been exhilarating, challenging him in a way that no one else dared. Learning of her end brought a strange emptiness. There would be no more guessing, no more games, no chance for closure. Instead, he found himself standing alone in his penthouse, staring at the skyline, haunted by the memory of their last encounter and the look in her eyes when she'd finally told him the truth. Renee Wolfe, ever vigilant, was the first to recognize Vanessa's name in the obituaries. She read the brief announcement with a faint smile, her suspicions finally confirmed. The woman who had come so close to dismantling everything Renee held dear was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. And yet, as she sat back, Renee couldn't ignore the small measure of respect she felt for Vanessa's boldness. In a world ruled by power, Vanessa had played the game as well as anyone, perhaps better than most. Renee held her glass up in a silent, mocking toast, acknowledging the woman who had almost bested her. For Vanessa's brother, Marcus, the news was a somber echo of a relationship frayed beyond repair. He had warned her, tried to pull her back from the edge, but Vanessa had been too determined, too caught up in a life that ultimately became her undoing. Still, he remembered her for who she had been before she fell into shadows. A sister with dreams, ambitions, and a fierceness that he would carry with him. Her memory for him would always be bittersweet, a reminder of the cost of ambition untethered from consequence. In her final moments, Vanessa Reid had become something more than just a woman skilled in manipulation and seduction. Her story, whispered through city corridors and elite circles, became a warning of how power, when wielded carelessly, can consume even the most cunning. But somewhere in the quiet hours of night her legacy lingered. For those who had known her, who had fallen under her spell or chased her across shadowed streets, Vanessa Reid remained a haunting figure, a beautiful illusion both tragic and unyielding. Her life had been a masterpiece of calculated risks, woven from the silken shadows of seduction, deception, and ultimately fate. And in those shadows her legend continued, a cautionary tale for those who dared to live by their own rules, reminding them that, in the end, even the most skillful manipulators could not escape the consequences of their choices. Legacy of the Shadows. Though Vanessa Reid was gone, her legacy continued to ripple through the lives she had touched and through the spaces she had once haunted. In high-end lounges and smoky backrooms, her story was retold with a mix of admiration and fear, a tale of a woman who had navigated the dangerous underworld of wealth, deception, and power with an unmatched skill. Logan Pierce found himself returning to the places they'd once shared. In a quiet moment on a rainy evening, he went to the rooftop where Vanessa had last confronted him. Standing alone looking over the city, he realized how much he missed her daring, her audacity, and her flawed brilliance. She had been his equal, a worthy adversary, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something vital had been taken from his life. To honor her, he made a choice. He would become even more careful, watching his own life and alliances with a vigilance sharpened by her memory. The lesson she left him was simple. Trust was rare and betrayal could come from anyone, even the most enchanting of companions. Detective Blake, however, was far from closure. He buried himself in the remnants of her case, retracing her steps, examining every move she'd made. There was something about Vanessa that fascinated him, a puzzle that felt only half solved, as though her death had left threads dangling, questions unanswered. In his pursuit of her, he had come to respect her skill, her nerve, even her charisma. With every detail he uncovered, he felt as though he were getting closer to understanding not just the woman she had become, but perhaps the girl she had once been. He'd remember Vanessa as a paradox, a thief who inspired admiration, a criminal who demanded respect. Marcus, Vanessa's brother, struggled with his grief. He had loved his sister despite her flaws, and he had tried to warn her, to save her from the path she was on. In the days following her death, he found himself revisiting old memories, Vanessa's laughter when they were children, her fierce ambition, her wild spirit. He had wanted to see her succeed, but not at such a high cost. Unable to let her memory fade into darkness, he decided to channel his grief into action. He established a foundation in her name, aimed at helping those who had struggled like Vanessa, to escape the traps of a ruthless world. In his heart he hoped it would bring her a semblance of redemption, a way to make her legacy something that could truly help others. As for Renee Wolfe, Vanessa's only true rival, she kept her memories of Vanessa private. On the surface she went on with her life, her power in the city growing unchecked. Yet in quiet moments she couldn't help but think of the woman who had dared to challenge her, who had come closer than anyone else to unraveling her carefully constructed world. Renee found herself looking over her shoulder more often, haunted by the possibility of another Vanessa, another woman daring enough to play by her own rules. Vanessa's audacity had left a mark on her as well, a reminder that even the strongest could be threatened by someone unafraid to live in the shadows. Over time, Vanessa Reid's name faded into myth, but the lessons she had imparted endured. For those who knew her story, she became a symbol of the cost of ambition, a cautionary tale whispered among those who dared to walk the thin line between power and peril. Her life had been a dance along the edge, a pursuit of freedom and control that had burned brightly and ultimately too fast. And in the corners of the city where shadows mingled with light, where power changed hands as easily as whispered secrets, her spirit lingered, an unbreakable presence that reminded all who dared to remember that true freedom could only be won by those willing to risk everything, and that in the end even the most skillful of manipulators would meet their reckoning. Vanessa Reid was gone, but the silken shadows she left behind would never fade. Final curtain. Vanessa Reid's tale ended as it was always destined to, with her life echoing like a fading whisper, a reminder of the delicate line between power and self-destruction. Those who had known her, those she had loved, deceived and rivaled, continued their lives, each bearing a piece of her in the choices they made and the memories they kept hidden away. Detective Blake moved on to new cases, but Vanessa's file remained a fixture on his shelf, a reminder of the one who'd evaded him until the end. He'd learned from her story, sharpening his instincts for the next brilliant mind he might encounter. In her absence he became not only a better detective but a more guarded man, wiser to the games people played and the masks they wore. Logan Pierce, once captivated by Vanessa's allure and disillusioned by her betrayal, ultimately came to understand that she had been a mirror to his own life, a reminder of the risks he took in his own pursuit of power. He closed that chapter, honoring her memory not with bitterness but with quiet acceptance, finding within himself a renewed strength to remain vigilant, yet open to the unpredictable currents of life. Marcus, her brother, kept Vanessa's memory alive in the foundation he built in her honor. Through it he offered opportunities to those trapped by desperation, knowing that had things been different, it might have saved his sister. It was his way of redeeming her, of ensuring that, despite her choices, her legacy would carry a glimmer of hope for others. Renee Wolfe, Vanessa's greatest rival, became more watchful, learning from Vanessa's boldness. She cemented her own power, a legacy untouched, yet Vanessa's ghost lingered, a silent reminder that even the mightiest could be toppled if they underestimated those who dared to defy them. Vanessa Reid had lived her life in the shadows, shaping her world with charm, audacity, and an unmatched skill for manipulation. Her story was a testament to the risks of wielding power unchecked, of believing that charm could outlast consequence. Though her life ended in darkness, her memory persisted, woven into the stories of those she'd impacted, like an invisible thread connecting lives in ways they'd never forget. In the end, Vanessa Reid remained an enigma, a woman whose legacy drifted through the city's underworld like the echo of Silken Shadows, a legend whispered among those who walked the line between ambition and ruin, freedom and fate. And as her story finally drew to a close, the world she left behind moved forward, each life she'd touched forever altered, bearing the silent lessons she'd left in her wake.